Hey guys, welcome to Masquerade of Motherhood, or as I like to call it, the Mom Show. I'm your host, Courtney Doyle, and this is a place where I am giving you permission to not have it all together. I have some really exciting news. Due to the response from the podcast, I have decided to take the Mom Show on the road. If you're part of a group and you would like for me to speak, follow the link to my website, CourtneyDoyleMinistries.com, and complete the request. This month, our episodes are dedicated to mental health and suicide awareness. We want to emphasize that these topics are sensitive and could be triggering for some listeners. If you or someone you know is contemplating suicide, please know that there are resources linked in the show notes of each episode. We approach these discussions with care and empathy, aiming to raise awareness and provide support. Thank you for tuning in as we navigate these important conversations together. Hey guys, welcome back to the show. I have our expert guest back, Beth Alvarez. Beth, I'm so grateful that you are willing to take time out of your busy schedule and meet with us, especially on these really hard topics. But that's why I wanted you to come in. This month has been all about mental health and suicide awareness and prevention. And who better to come and share that with us than an expert who can say, hey, I am seeing this. I am meeting with families and with kids who have been in this dark place. And I think as moms, we can't help but have those questions. I don't think anybody that's listening has not been touched in some way or another by suicide, whether it's happened personally in our families or with friends or just maybe somebody in the community that you knew. And it's a scary thought that somebody would feel so desperate and so alone that they would feel like taking their lives was the only way out. And so welcome back, Beth, to this hard topic.
Thank you. I'm so glad you're talking about these important issues. It means so much because it's happening, and it's happening in either our homes or family homes that we know, and where people and teens and youth are struggling. And so it's a good thing that we're talking about it.
Let's jump right in. Do you have some statistics? Why does it feel like this is happening so much more lately? What are the suicide rates looking like right now?
And they are increasing. In 2021, there were one death every 11 minutes.
Every 11 minutes?
Think about that. 11 minutes passed and somebody successfully completed suicide. It is the second leading cause of death behind accidents for 10 to 14-year-olds.
Oh, Beth, that's young.
So we're talking younger and younger ages. We're talking upper elementary, junior high kids that are already having these thoughts, some of who are completing suicide. And then it's the second leading cause for 20 to 34-year-olds. So we need to be talking about this like you are for especially our junior high college kids, especially for them. So I'm really glad you brought it up.
The thought, Beth, of a 10 to 14-year-old feeling so desperate.
Feeling that desperate.
Our youngest is 12. And I'm thinking, he's right in the middle of that. That's horrible that a child that young could feel that alone.
13.2 million people had serious thoughts of suicide in 2022. 13.2 million people. That's a big number.
And these are the people that answered the survey that was done.
3.8 people had a plan and 1.6 million people attempted. I have probably worked with 5 or 6 teenagers post attempts. So that's not even those that just weren't successful. So it's rampant. It's a really big issue. We need to be talking about it. We need to make it so that it's not so taboo to talk about. It's very uncomfortable, but it actually, I think, helps to be able to give us language that helps us talk about it and confront it and have more open communication about it. I started having more open communication with my younger children because we were doing this, I started asking them questions. What do you hear about this? What do you think about this? Have you ever had those thoughts? And just making it a part of our conversation. I would want you to know you could always come to us if you ever had a thought like that would be a scary place to be. And just making it where we aren't so scared to bring it up and have those conversations.
Okay, so Beth, I think that you're saying you started having these conversations much younger. I think people are really scared to have these conversations with younger kids because they feel like, am I planting that idea? Am I giving them an idea? And what you're saying is, no, you need to be having these conversations. I'll be honest, and maybe you can concur with me on this. When I was younger, I didn't know what suicide was. I remember being
Right.
well into probably high school
Mhm.
before I understood what that term actually meant.
Mhm. Mhm.
And now you're
But
saying
but
talk to your kids.
when you're looking at it's the second leading cause of death between 10 and 14-year-olds. We went through that season where people weren't really talking about sex. And they were like, how young do you need to be talking to your kids about sex? And it was like, if you haven't told them by 5th grade, somebody else has.
Mhm.
Somehow else they have learned about it. And so be the one to have these conversations. Now, I'm not saying go into it just graphically or anything like that, but this is so sad. Have you ever, heard about this in upper elementary school where some people don't feel like their life is worth living, or I don't know how to always bring it up, but I do think these kids they're learning about it. They're talking about it,
Mhm.
and they have
Mhm.
these thoughts. It doesn't take a lot for them to experience something that then might make them question, do I matter? Is my life worth living? Do I have purpose and meaning? Do people care about me? Or if they're feeling such extreme emotional instability, such deep despair, even from a
Mhm.
younger age. If you're aware of depression in your older elementary school, I would be having the conversation. Hey, I just
Mhm.
want you to know your life is so valuable. I always want you here. You are a gift. And if you ever have a thought that you don't matter, your life's not worth living, please reach out to us. Please let us know.
Yeah.
Something like that.
There was a conversation that I intercepted on a phone with my 12-year-old. And it was a young girl who was feeling unaccepted by the
Mhm.
group that she was friends with. And some of the language that she used in the text message was, I just wish I could die, or
Mhm.
it was something along those lines. And when I saw it, he and I, of course, that
Mhm.
was a great opportunity for me to
Right.
talk to him about that. And I also told him we're going to take this very serious.
Right.
I think of those conversations after 9/11. You could no longer walk
Mhm.
through an airport and jokingly be like, "Oh, I have a bomb in my pocket," or
Mhm.
like, you don't mention those
Mhm.
words when you walk into an airport. Like,
Mhm.
that is
Mhm.
serious offense, and people are gonna be on you, they're gonna be searching you, they're gonna be seeing is this is not a joke. We don't talk about having guns and
Right.
weapons and bombs when we walk into an airport. And I feel like that's the same thing that we should be looking at when we see
Mhm.
language of suicide in
Absolutely.
conversations. Like, instead of going, "Oh, she would never do that,"
No,
or "She's
absolutely.
being dramatic," or
Mhm.
anything like that, we need to be taking those comments just
Mhm.
as seriously
Mhm.
as walking into an airport and saying, "I have a bomb." You would never do that, and that would be
Mhm.
reported
Mhm.
immediately.
Mhm.
Even if it is a kid maybe saying those words because they're looking for attention or they're looking for a reaction from somebody,
Mhm.
it needs to be addressed and it needs to be
Mhm.
told to an adult.
Mhm. You did not miss the opportunity to have the conversation. Good for
Mhm.
you. You saw it, you were aware, and you didn't miss the opportunity. It's the parents who, when that comes to light and they don't believe the child or don't take it seriously, that I have the greatest concerns about,
Mhm.
because it's not something to just think, oh, my child would never do that. I'm not willing to take that risk.
Yeah.
And so whenever anything like that gets mentioned, I want to make it where we can have an open conversation about it, and I can probe the child even to the extent of, hey, you made this comment. Do you think you would ever do anything like that?
Mm-hmm.
And I recently had somebody tell me, I don't know. And my radar really peered up. And the parents, I don't believe, thought it was that big a deal or thought it was as important or concerning as I did. And that relationship, that therapeutic relationship dissolved because I said, this is important. We've got to get this addressed.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's jump into what I think most moms would want to ask. And I did poll a few moms whenever I told them that I was going to have you on.
Mhm.
And the biggest question that I got from people are, what are the warning signs? What are the
Mm.
risk factors? What do I need to be looking for that could potentially point to my child being this desperate and making decisions like this?
Right. One of the things that I love that you said is when you saw the text message and somebody had commented in it, you believed them and you took it to heart. If there's a comment made, believe your child, even however they're talking about it. We know that major depression is a big warning sign, and bipolar depression. So mental illness, those that are really linked with despair, are huge warning signs. Now, sometimes, even in these recent episodes you all have talked about, brought to light, that sometimes it doesn't look like what we would typically see as depression. A child may have behavioral issues, may be really angry, may start being defiant. I like to tell parents, when you see your child behaving differently, this does not seem like him or her. This is not what I'm used to. Something seems different. I'll tell you, it's very common bullying and bullying through even our phones. And this is where those younger ages come in.
Yeah.
If you're not aware that this is going on, that's a big warning sign. That can cause a lot of emotional despair, a lot of emotional pain. And so remaining connected and trying to be open with your children, knowing what's going on, any language that is indicative of them feeling hopeless or in despair, you want to pay attention to. Previous attempt would be another one, but you're already going to be open and knowing that you're looking at that. If you hear language around that they feel like a burden, nobody wants them, I don't have any friends, I'm lonely, those types of things. But Courtney, I hate to say it, but sometimes there's not warning signs either.
Really?
There can be attempts and it feels like it came out of nowhere. So you're also dealing with an independent person who has their own thoughts and behaviors. So I like to tell parents sometimes you're not missing something. As difficult as that is, sometimes these teens they keep it hidden. They don't want to be a burden. They don't want you to worry about them. They don't share. Maybe it's not an open relationship. Maybe they are holding expectations on them of a different story. And so they don't share. They don't give any knowledge out of it. Sometimes there's a saying that those that talk about it want help. Those that don't didn't want any help. And sometimes these kids didn't give any warning sign.
Yeah. That my guest last week, Lori, whenever she mentioned that her daughter there was a friend that reached out. And then my other guest, Jeanette, she talked about how there was a teacher that saw her
Yes.
son. And so in both of those situations, especially with Lori, I think that I think through high school, when our kids are still under our roofs, their friends are coming over and you're getting to know their friends. And I think that's important. Sometimes they don't want you to know their friends. They're, but I think it's important for us as parents to continue to be involved, even though now they're driving their own car and they have more autonomy to do things. I do think it's so important to still maintain friendship with your kids' friends.
Yes.
That way they do have somebody else that's looking out for them. What a blessing that Lori's daughter's friend was like, hey, she's not herself. And I thought that was such an important thought process for me, having kids that are in college. Even your kid in college, they're away, but get to know your kids' college friends as well. Even if it's just, hey, I just want your friends to have my number in the event
That's a great idea.
you need somebody, right?
Yeah.
Other people. And I would like to have your friends' numbers just in case.
Mhm.
I think it's so important. I have a group chat with some moms,
Mhm.
and we had never met for a long time. We had never met in person, but
Mhm.
all of our boys were in the same fraternity. And we
Mm,
realized we
mhm.
were all from the same central area. And so
Mhm.
just the moms, and I would mention these boys
Mhm.
to Harrison, and it was boys that he didn't even know. We're talking about a
Right.
fraternity house with hundreds of kids. And he would be like, I don't know him. He's younger
Mhm.
than me, I think, or
Right.
whatever. And I was like, yeah, his mom and I are really good friends. But it was
Mhm.
so helpful because that particular group of
Mhm.
boys went through something really devastating
Mhm.
last fall as a
Mhm.
community. And it was so great that as
Yeah.
moms, we could do check ins
Mhm.
with each other about our kids. And it was so beneficial to have those adults
Mhm.
that were like, I've got my eyes on this kid, or this kid seems pretty upset about it. It was
I think that's
so
so wise.
helpful.
It's
Yeah.
so wise. I really get concerned when I hear about a child who begins to isolate when they weren't isolated before, or start
Mhm.
sleeping, or suddenly feeling real anxious and withdrawn and hiding. That's
Mhm.
concerning. I think it's so important to have community and
Mhm.
have other people who know our kids. Yeah, absolutely. There was one
Yeah.
time where one of my sons, suddenly he's very extrovert. He's an extrovert and very social. And suddenly he was just home more. And I remember I started asking, is everything okay? I noticed you're home a lot more. I noticed you're not with these friends who you've been friends with for a long time. And it came out that they were choosing some different behaviors. And there was some time he's, I'm okay. I just want to be home more. And
Mhm.
that's so hard when you see that change, because you want to trust your child, but you're also looking at these different behaviors. So
Mhm.
have the conversation. And I remember being like, are you emotionally okay? Is everything
Mhm.
okay? And he said, yeah, I just need more time at home right now.
Mhm. And
Mm-hmm.
Jeanette, the podcast episode 2 weeks ago, that was one of the things that she talked about when her son was sleeping more. It
Yep.
was, this is normal teenage behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he started
Mm-hmm.
being a little disobedient. That wasn't
Mm-hmm.
like
Right.
him. And she said the depression did not look like the definition of
Right.
depression. All it looked so drastically different from what
Mm-hmm.
they were expecting.
Mm-hmm.
And but it was all those red flags of
Right.
something's not right. And he got to a very desperate place. And I love that now it's not a secret in their home. It is something they
Right.
continue to address, they continue to talk about.
Yes.
And that I loved that they named the
I
depression.
thought that was, I've heard that one other time where actually with a behavior and they named it, a family named it. Hey, has this come up? And I think that's a good way to handle it. It's a good way to be able to be open and talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Just,
not a
it's not,
secret.
and it's not going away if you don't talk about it.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I think that's really wise. Times, unless you've experienced depression, this can come on genetically, chemically in the
Mhm.
brain. It can be situationally, but not always. A lot of times, if you haven't experienced depression, you're looking for a circumstance or a situation to cause it.
Mm.
And sometimes there's not a cause of it.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's just,
And we need to
it
be
can be
aware of that.
brain
We need to be
chemistry.
aware.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is there a history of this
Mm-hmm.
in your family? What did that
Genetic.
look
Mm-hmm.
like?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. And
Mm-hmm.
speaking of, people look for what caused it. How do we help our kids? Look, our kids are going to be devastated. They're going to be
Mm-hmm.
disappointed. They're not going to get accepted. They're not going to make the team. They may
Right.
fail a class.
Mm-hmm.
How do we help our kids with these feelings of disappointment and maybe devastating news?
It's interesting the timing of this because I just finished seeing one of my teen clients who she has had a history of a suicide attempt. And so I was telling her I was going to do this. And I said, can I ask you some of the questions that are being proposed and just hear your feedback? And she said, I'm so glad that my input matters. But I think she gives us a unique perspective. And the very first thing she said is, don't tell me it's all going to be okay. Because in the moment that feels like a band-aid and it doesn't feel like it's not okay in the feeling of that moment that that it is okay. Um,
Mhm.
Everybody has to learn to walk through disappointing and devastating news. If you're a human being on this planet, you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
And We don't have to shield or protect our kids from being disappointed. It's a part of life. And so I think about how you would want a friend to show up for you. You'd want to be able to share. You'd want them to listen. I am one of those people that would want encouragement. I'd want to know it's going to be okay. Ask your child, hey, can I tell you a story when I've been disappointed in my life and what helped me through it? And then if they say, no, I don't really want to hear about that right now, mom, then lay off. Hey, can I tell you a scripture that I hold on to when I'm feeling disappointed that helps me? And give them permission to say, no, I don't really want to hear that. Sometimes they want space. Sometimes you can be a person. The biggest thing is letting them know they are so valuable. You love them so much, and that you're there for them. You're willing to be present for them and what they need, and let them figure out what they need. Now, if they don't, hey, my client, when I was talking to her, she said somebody took her out for a good meal, and that just made her feel so cared for. And it was the time, it was the attention. She knew somebody had eyes on her. She was seen. She was loved. She mattered. That's the biggest reflection we want to give our children when they're struggling emotionally, when they're disappointed. I remember my oldest daughter had tried out for one of the teams in the public school we were in junior high, and she didn't make it. And I remember the coach had 4 daughters. And so I called her, and I'll never forget, she quickly said, I know you're upset your daughter didn't make the team. I'm sorry, not everybody makes the team. And I said, actually, I'm calling for a different reason. She said, what? And I said, I think disappointment is a way of, you're going to be disappointed in your life. And I want her to learn how to walk through feeling disappointed. And then there were some questions I had. But I remember she was stuck in her shoes because she was like, oh, okay, this is a different perspective. But what do they need in the moment? We do not want them going to feelings of despair and hopelessness. I listen for false beliefs and automatic negative stories that they're making up, where they're taking this event and they're making it about who they are. Then that's where I'm going to stop you there. I know it. And they'll say, feels like it. That doesn't make it true. That's a feeling. Tell me how you're feeling about it. Because feeling disappointed is very different than feeling like a disappointment. Taking it on as an identity and making it about who we are. That's very different. I think so good, Beth. People, they really want you to listen to them. Give them the space where they can just share what they're thinking about, and try not to always tell them how they're wrong. Listen for these lies, but let them just process some of what they're feeling. When we give them space to process, they can be doing their own healing as well. And I think we forget that when we sit with somebody and they're thinking about it and they're verbally processing it, they can be creating their own path to healing. The children or the teens who are emotionally more dysregulated are more impulsive, and these feelings almost feel unmanageable for them. That's where we want to give them tools to really help. Okay, feelings should come like the wave of the ocean, and you should be able to feel them and knowing, what do I need in the midst of going through this? When it feels like it's overtaking someone, we want to give them tools to better cope with those emotions.
Don't you think also that, like you said, disappointment is going to come? And for me, as a mom, we don't want our kids to be disappointed. We don't want them to not win or to not be successful. And I think that there has been such a shift in parenting styles that we're the broom behind them, sweeping up any mess that they make, fixing things that maybe they did wrong to make it look better or for them not to suffer the consequences. Like, we don't want our kids to suffer consequences. We don't want them to suffer disappointment. We don't want them to get a bad grade on the project that they left at home for the third time in a row
Mm,
for school. And so we're constantly sweeping it up and fixing it. And then they're never learning,
yeah.
hey, our actions have
Mm-mm.
consequences
Right.
and you're going to be disappointed. And I think that starts so young. Look, I'm
Right.
so guilty of doing that
Right.
as well until I started realizing, and of course, I parented enough and taken enough parenting courses that I started realizing, man, I want them to be disappointed. I want them to fail in my home so that I can
Right.
help them through
Right.
this versus me
Mhm.
bubble wrapping them and sugarcoating
Right.
life. And
Right.
then eventually you do have to send them off and
Right.
life is hard and
Right.
disappointment is going to come. We're in
And
a
it's
really
not reality. It's
right.
not reality. Reality says this life can be hard and there's hilltops and there's valleys. And most babies don't come out with all the character already
Mhm.
ingrained
Yeah.
in them.
Yeah.
Character gets grown and developed. And I think I want my kids to know I've walked through disappointment and have built some resiliency and can get through to the other side.
Mhm.
And I want to be there to be supportive as they're learning that, as they're going through that. And
Mhm.
I don't know if we talked about this before, but stop robbing your kids. The constant natural consequences of just learning valuable lessons
Mm.
where we're not fixing everything. God, that's not how God treats us.
Right. You We're talking about the natural consequences and it can feel, like you said, our feelings,
Mhm.
it feels like a lot. And one of the moms that I talked to prior to this session with you today, one of the things that she was sharing with me was that when she was a teenager, she had a boyfriend and it was really not a great relationship at all.
Mhm.
She's like, I knew that I did
Mhm.
not need to be dating this guy. He was making really
Mhm.
poor choices. I was then making poor choices with him and for
Mhm.
him.
Mhm.
And she said, but I remember when we broke up and
Mhm.
this is now married with several children later and not to that guy. And she said, but I remember breaking up with him or him breaking up with me and me feeling like this was just the end of the world. Like, how was I
Mhm.
ever going to survive
Right.
without him? And so, what she had shared with me is she was like, gosh, if I now looking back, I'm like, that is so ridiculous. I was so ridiculous. She was like, but at the time, it felt
Right.
so big and she said things like not making the team, things like boyfriend and girlfriend breaking up. Maybe you didn't get accepted into the college or into a program that you so desperately wanted to get into. How do we as parents talk to our kids about this may feel big right now, but in reality, as parents, we know this is not something that's really going to affect you later in life.
Mhm.
If you did not make the varsity cheer team, it feels huge right now.
Right.
But
Right.
in reality, as an adult, you and I are going, being
Right.
a varsity cheerleader would not make any
Right.
difference in where I am
Right.
today as a woman, as an
Right.
entrepreneur, as a mother,
Right.
or whatever. Same thing with boys, whatever it may be. How do we parent them through that without saying, like what your client said, don't
Right.
tell me it's okay. It's not okay. But how do we communicate to them? We understand that it's not okay today, but in the grand scheme of your life, this is a blip. This is not going to really matter in the long run.
Mhm. They don't have that perspective yet.
Mhm.
Most don't. Now, some may. Hey, do you remember a difficulty when you were in elementary school or junior high? And how did that feel back then? You can maybe relate it then. I think that's something that you hold and where you can offer, hey, can I tell you an experience that meant a lot to me? This is not going to define your life. And I think
Mm.
those things are okay. But I think you don't want to, there's a careful line where you don't want to invalidate their feelings and their experience. You want to show up and you want to be empathetic. Hey, that sounds really tough. That sounds really difficult. What meaning are you making up about this? And have those conversations, validate that it's a very difficult experience for them, Hey, can you remember a time that something else felt really important? You were really disappointed in your life? Do it that way. I think we can hold and know this isn't the most important thing in your life, but in their world, it feels very important. So you have to be very careful, your language, just not to invalidate them.
Mm-hmm.
But you
Mm-hmm.
want to give them a lot of empathy. I know God can use even this. I wonder how, like this 17-year-old, we talk a lot about what do you want your 20-year-old self to know about this time?
Mm.
So she can bridge her. And what are you going to be glad about when you're 20 that you're past in this season of your life? We talk about
Mm-hmm.
those things. Hey, what are you really looking forward to when you come out on this on the other side of this season? What do you want to be? What are you looking forward to? What do you hope happens? A lot of open-ended questions where you're continuing to build that connection and offer them a space to just communicate and then let them have their feelings. It's tough to go through.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think it's also so important when we are having those conversations and we're learning to be better with those conversations, those open-ended questions. As our children grow, it would be also beneficial because you're training them to have those conversations.
Mhm.
Because unfortunately, not every friend that they come in contact with may have that type of relationship
Right.
with their parents. So they may come to you. And I think it's important as our children get older, like we were talking about, even my 12-year-old taking that moment and going, this language is not acceptable.
Right.
This is a cry for help. If you ever see something like this, you do need to come to mom. We need to tell somebody because this is serious. And I think that's something that we need to be teaching our children as well. Hey,
Mhm.
when your friends say things like this, take it serious. When you see different behaviors in your friends,
Then it just becomes, hey, are you okay? I'm
mhm,
concerned. I see that you're in a lot of pain. What do you
yeah.
need?
Mhm. But Beth, the world right now is telling us worry about you. It's all about
Right.
you.
Yeah.
Focus on you. How do you make you
Hmm.
happy? And so we've taken such an introverted self-reflective view of our lives versus opening our eyes and being aware to the body language of people,
Right.
having those conversations because conversations are just not happening. It's all through text
Hmm.
message or we're not meeting with people anymore
Yeah.
and we're not having those deep conversations. A lot is lost because it's through a device. It's not through a
Hmm.
one-on-one personal relationship with somebody where you can see something's not right. And I think that communication in family homes is being lost. Go sit at
Yeah.
a restaurant
Right.
right now
Hmm.
and look across the table
Hmm.
and you'll see an
Hmm.
entire family and
Hmm.
everybody's on a device. Look,
Right.
I'm not, this is, I, I'm not, I've done it. I've done
Right.
it. We've gone to a restaurant and next thing I know, I look up and I'm like, what are we doing? What are
Right.
we doing? And so
Let
it's
me,
being aware.
yeah, let me say, if your child, teen is struggling in any way with having any kinds of these thoughts, despair, all of that, the phones, especially social media that bring up comparison, are increasingly making it more difficult for them to recover in a healthy way.
Mm,
Not everybody battles this, but if you have a child that has mental health issues or a mental illness that is diagnosed, I have seen it repeatedly. When we can get that time reduced on the phone, if not, get them off the phone or off social media, they recover so much better. I have
interesting.
heard people tell me, I've seen it with my own children. They come back in a childlike way. They come back in personality in a different way when they are sucked into either the games or social media or this mindless scrolling that we're just
Mm-hmm.
wasting so much time on, they do recover. I had a woman who came straight out of a residential hospitalization treatment, and she said, I'll work with you. I really want to recover. I want a new job. I want to move. And she was a young adult. And I worked with her twice a week for 8 weeks, but we did like a substance abuse, no tolerance, alcohol, no tolerance, And social media, you got to agree to get off and let me see what we can do. And we did some trauma work too, some trauma healing work, but she ended up falling in love with furniture repurposing and refurbishing. She spent all this time in the garage painting. And within 8 weeks, she had applied for a new job and moved to Dallas. And I think her being off that phone, it was causing so much anxiety, so much despair that it just she wasn't equipped for her personality to handle that much time seeing it. You've got to know your children. We've got to know ourselves. Some people as moms aren't handling watching social media well. So we've got to know ourselves and know our kids. Comparison is such a trap. You are either feeling better than or less than, and it's so unnecessary. When you have identified that my child is struggling, I really would encourage you to have those talks around the phones.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so important. And which leads me to my next question, and is interesting that you say that because one of my guests this month, actually, she did a TikTok a couple of days ago, and she said, are we strict parents? She asked the question, she was talking through it on this TikTok, and she said, here are some of the rules that we have in place for our teenage kids. And they think we're just so strict. I'm curious, are we strict parents? And she named some of the rules that she had in place. It went viral. And within 24 hours, I think last check in, she was at like 11 million views.
Oh, wow.
An article has now been written in US Weekly about are we strict parents? But here's what's crazy, because her and I are friends and we've talked outside of this, the hate that she has received. And it's basically, you're so strict, your kids are never going to speak to you again. Now, her rules are not unrealistic. She sets time limits on social media, no screens in the bedroom. If you have a opposite sex friend come over, no sharing of blankets. I'm looking at her rules and I'm like, good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you that you have these parameters in place. But she's been beat up pretty hard on social media. And so that leads me actually to my next question. Are parents who have these rules, these time parameters, these no screens in certain places, if you're strict, your kids have to have a curfew, they have to check in with you, whatever your rules are in your house, could certain parenting styles, such as being too strict or too lenient, could that cause a child to be suicidal?
This is how I look at it. Would you protect that which is so valuable to you?
Yes.
So when I talk about our job as parents is to communicate back, you are so valuable to me. You are so worth it. You mean so much and you matter. Your life is precious. You are vulnerable and worth protecting. Children do not have the physical brain development as adults, and some adults aren't even doing this well, to be able to practice so much self-control. They're more impulsive. That prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until their 20s. And so the ability to stop and pause. So I believe we are used in a way to put up guardrails around our children to say, that's enough. So I don't want somebody too strict over here or too lenient over here, because what you're looking for is this imperfect child to have opportunities. They're going to make mistakes and to learn how to navigate this road. Okay. You give according to their responsibility and their level of trust, right? You give them an opportunity to take something, and how are they proving to be responsible with it? How are they proving to be trustworthy with it? If we look at phones, or if we look at a car, if we look at alone time, going out, whatever it is. And then, okay, oh gosh, I realize you're not ready for this. by your behavior or by whatever happened, by your choices, I realized this is too much responsibility. That is one thing we are doing with these kids. We are giving them way too much. Their brain is not physically ready for everything they are exposed to on these devices. They aren't. We can tell. That's why when you take them away, they recover. Do you know the brain on pornography will get better if you take it away, but it will look like a cocaine addicted brain?
Wow. No.
I'm saying, and it's interesting, I posed this question to my client, and she was an adamant yes, because she would say that her parents are very strict, but to the point where she feels controlled. And so, why is life worth living? I'm trapped here. I have no say here. But I'm also not valued here.
Yeah.
So that's very different. When you were saying those things, when you were talking about the TikTok, my question was, do they know her why? Because some
Right.
parents,
And they don't.
right, they
They
don't.
don't. I
Some
know her
parents,
why.
yeah,
And
that
knowing
is
her why it makes so much sense on why there
right.
would be limited screen time.
But I don't even think that sometimes parents aren't considering their own why. Why would I have this limit? Why would I have this guardrail set up for you? Because you're valuable, because I care about your brain, because you know what? We've got alcoholism through every line in our family. And so this is a deal breaker for me to protect you. What is our why? And why are we communicating that to our children? There's so much that goes into this. I will never tell a parent ever, you are responsible for causing the death of your child by suicide. I would never, ever. Are there things that a parent can influence for a child? Absolutely. And I think remaining with the knowledge of your greatest duty is communicate value and worth to your child all the time. Value and worth. You do not have to agree with their choices, but loving them, offering them support, showing up for them, and being present for them. I was thinking about this. I know kids who have grown up to be such great, functioning, independent adults who went through horrible childhoods, neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse. I mean, the gamut. And they never had thoughts of suicide. They didn't get their needs met from their parents, never had a thought of suicide. On the flip side, we see it where that looks like this perfect family and they had everything and were given everything, and a child, they take their life. So you never know. There's too much going on in everybody's unique brain, in everybody's genetic makeup and his chemical history. There's too many different factors. But what I do know, if you can show up, and I'm a broken record, but this reflect their value and worth, be present with them, listen to them, believe them, tell them they matter. We're not, as we're raising our children, we're not looking for friendships. We're looking to be a parent. We're in a position to teach them, to raise them up, to equip them to go and be functional, independent adults. And her why, when you were saying it, I was like, her why is very clear to me. And there's a lot of people that wouldn't agree because they don't know her why.
And I think that sometimes as parents, and again, I sound like a broken record, when we lose our own identity to the successes and the failures of our children, when our identity is wrapped up in our children, then we are putting a ridiculous amount of pressure on these kids to perform so that we look good. And that is a really dangerous place to be as a parent as well, because then you're setting this bar of my identity and my worth comes from your performance and what you do. And then you may have a kiddo that's crying out for help and you're not valuing their worth or their opinion, because their opinion, it may reflect negatively on you, or you want to be their friend. And as an adult, you need to have your own friends. Your kids are not your
Mhm.
friends. Your kids are not the ones that are going to always make you feel good and can't always be the ones that make mom okay.
Mhm.
That
And
it's
that's not
it's
their job.
it's not, and it's
That's
putting a lot
backwards.
of
Yeah.
responsibility and pressure. And I do think, like what you were saying, what is your why? When you communicate that why, we have a rule in our family, and it's the 2 up, 2 down rule. Up until you leave for college or you're an adult, we don't allow our kids to date 2 years older or 2 years younger.
Mm.
And there's a
Mhm.
why behind that.
Yeah.
And that why comes from my own personal history
Mhm.
of relationship dating
Mhm.
somebody that was older than me. And
Mhm.
so that's become a rule in our home, but I'm very
Mhm.
open about why
Mhm.
their dad is 6 years older than me, but I was an adult when I met him. And
Mhm.
so I'm like, look, when you become an
Mhm.
adult and you're a college kid and you meet maybe a guy or a
Right.
girl and there's a difference in that age, that's different. You are older, you're more mature, but I do not think that a
Mhm.
ninth grade girl should be dating a junior or senior in high school.
Mhm.
There's a
Right.
big difference in maturity there and vice versa. I don't
Right.
think a senior boy
Mhm.
should be dating a ninth grade girl. And so it's been an understanding and a rule in our house. And some may say that's so strict, but my kids have never batted an eye at it because we communicated why
Mhm.
this was so important to us and the lessons that we learned growing up
Mhm.
and the difference that we saw. And they respected that so much. And
Right.
it was never a rule that they even attempted to break because they knew,
It's
"Oh, this is
right.
just how our family this is what we do. 2
It's
up, 2 down."
interesting that we talk about leniency and strict in parenting. Really, what we're talking about is where are the boundaries we want to establish that we feel convictions around?
Mhm.
Where are my values? What are my deal breakers? And every family I work with, I talk about that. Know your boundaries, like little circles around your unit, but then there's hard line brick walls. This is a deal breaker. We're not doing this in our
Mhm.
family.
Mhm.
And I guess when we look at strict, that's what we're talking about. And boundaries can be negotiated with our children as they grow up. These deal breakers, brick walls, we're not moving past these.
Mhm.
This is a hard no for me. And this is why. Have a why. I think sometimes this, when you go way over here to strict, you have to examine, am I trying to take control of this my child who is a valuable human being? Am I taking control away from them in an area where they should have choice?
Mm.
And all
Mhm.
around every single issue is going to be different. I know that when a family comes in and there has been a suicide attempt or a suicidal thought, somebody's struggling, there's a lot that goes out the window of the maybe minor things and concerns where I have to tell parents, I know that was a big issue before, but that's majoring in the minors and it doesn't matter. And I just want you to drop it. All we're going to do is
Mm.
focus on, we're going to flood this child with how much they matter, how valuable they are, give them some space, but keep connected. And some of that stuff just has to move out of the way and not be a big issue anymore.
Mhm. Mhm. I'm only sharing this because this is advice that you and I have talked about. I think parents need to be okay with going against the norm.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to
Mm-hmm.
look the way everybody else
Right.
looks.
Right.
And my guest last week, Lori, when her daughter was in college and she realized the depth of the depression that she was experiencing,
Yeah.
she had the ability to go to that
Yeah.
college campus and stay there
Mm-hmm.
with her
Yeah.
until she was in a position.
Mm-hmm.
If your kid's feeling that way,
Mm-hmm.
bring them home. Make drastic changes
Right.
if that's what it calls
Mm-hmm.
for, and be unapologetic
Right.
about making the decisions that you make for your children. Because
Right.
society says this is what they have to do, or all of their
Mm-hmm.
friends are doing it, or whatever it may be, it's easy to get caught up in that flood of this is what it's supposed to look like, or this is what I envisioned. My
Right.
expectation was this, and this looks different than what I
Mm-hmm.
expected or that what I had imagined. Be
Mm-hmm.
okay and be unapologetic about doing things drastic if need be to educate, to
Mm-hmm.
protect, to show your children that value. And if it looks like, hey, we're not going to go to school right now, or it looks like we're going to we're going to pull out and we're going to homeschool. Some of what we did just this year with
Right.
Hamilton, there was
Right.
something not right
Right.
about the way he was feeling in school.
Mhm.
And I unapologetically, and
Absolutely.
honestly, Beth, I don't know that this is 49-year-old mom of 6. I don't know that 39-year-old
Mhm.
mom of 6 would have done that. It's
Right.
just life has taught me things differently, and it's made me more confident in saying, I don't owe an explanation to anybody. This is what is healthy for him today.
And
And
there's so
then
much
this is how we're
freedom
going
in
to move
that.
through it.
There's
Oh my
so
gosh,
much
yes.
freedom in, you know what? No one else is trying to preserve and speak into my child's life and preserve that than us. It doesn't matter if
Mhm.
people don't agree with how I'm doing it. Now, if I've got a team of helpers, we're going to talk about what we can do, how we show up for our kids. But if I've got a team of helpers and I'm going against what all of they are saying, then I need to look at my motives.
Yeah.
But I'm not looking to win a popularity contest in my parenting when my
Yeah.
child is struggling with some despair, or if they were to struggle with suicidal thoughts.
Let's
Mhm.
jump. This has been so good. And I know we could continue because there's so much information and that is so important around this. And I so appreciate that your client was like, I want to share my perspective. That's so valuable for us to
Mhm.
hear those words of, I wanted to be seen. I didn't want to
Mhm.
be told it's going to be okay. It didn't feel okay. And just the simplicity of taking her to dinner and hearing her, listening,
Mhm.
really listening matters.
Mhm.
And if I've learned nothing more, and sometimes I still have to practice it, shutting my own mouth. Like
Yeah.
I we don't need my advice right now. We don't
Mhm.
need my opinion. We just need to be a listening ear. But
Mhm.
what are the next steps? Our child has revealed, or we
Mhm.
have learned through maybe a friend or a text message or a counselor at school, whatever it
Mhm.
may be, that they are experiencing suicidal thoughts. Beth, what
Mhm.
next? What do we do?
Well, I think first of all, believe them. When I work with a family and they start questioning, I'm not sure I believe her. I say, it doesn't matter. She
Mm,
has expressed it. We're going to believe her. We're not going to take that risk, especially if they've already had an attempt, if they already have a history of self-harm. We're going to believe them. And then build community, build a team. I love the idea of a team of helpers. So I have worked with some families and teens or adolescents, young adults, and I have a psychiatrist that I work with. I've got a life coach that I work with. I've got me, and we're all coming and really providing a safety net and support, not just for this child, but for the family. I
mm,
know one client, she went to a residential treatment facility for 90 days, and I worked with the parents pretty intensely during that time until she came back. And then we navigated her back into the home. And before she left, this is so important. Before she left, she was still in great despair. And I remember asking her, would you be willing to make this safety plan with me? And at first she said no. And I worked with her, and I finally got her to a place, because usually it would read, okay, these are my warning signs when I start feeling emotionally dysregulated, or I have these thoughts. This is what I need to do. This is who I need to contact. Anybody you
mhm,
working with should do a collaborative safety plan with your child that they take with them, and the counselor has one on file that shows them names and numbers of people they reach out to. 988 is also a suicide hotline they can always call to talk to somebody. But this particular client, she would not commit to remaining alive for 1 week later. She would not. So I
wow.
finally got her. The place that she said she could commit was 2 days. And so I said, okay, I'll see you in 2 days. And then we built from there, and we kept building from there, and we kept working. And her parents worked. I worked with her. She had a psychiatrist. We did some trauma work, and she's in college and she's thriving. She's doing well. She's out of it.
Mm,
But remember, at that moment, you are looking for safety. That
mhm.
is your ultimate goal, is safety. And so whatever you do in that time is how can I keep you safe? I read a staggering statistic, Courtney, that of people who were identified as having suicidal thoughts, there were all these percentages of people who had firearms, and 50% refused to lock up or get rid of their firearms. 50%. Yeah, that's staggering.
Yeah.
Now, I am one of those, and I'll tell parents, to some degree, there can be something in the home that somebody could hurt themselves with that you probably can't get rid of everything. But a firearm accessible to somebody who is having suicidal thoughts is just really foolish. Think about that. What are you willing to do? Building community and then building support, not judging them for having these feelings and thoughts. And I like to say, quit shoulding all over them. You should do this. You should feel this. You should read this. You should look at this. You should quit doing that. It puts unnecessary pressure on them. They may be doing well just to show up. I have a client that I've seen for a couple of years, and he walked in this week and he said, I could either shower or weed eat, and I only have the energy to weed eat. Not somebody that is in a deep depression. And you know what he needs? He needs to know he's got people in his corner. And that's what we're talking about, showing up as moms, as families. We're in your corner. I'm not so frightened by how dark this looks that I cannot be present with you. Because a lot of times, and this is another point, as your child has this team of helpers or support, a counselor, whoever it may be, get your own help. Have your own separate person that you are working with to manage these conversations, to help you with your own emotional regulation and what you're going through as you help your child. It is very difficult. I have navigated some of this through different seasons with a child, and it is very difficult. You are so concerned, and you want to show up and give everything you can to this child. You want to help your child feel better. Get your own help as you navigate it. And that's nice, because then your child doesn't have to worry about how you are. I love to tell parents, you communicate. You know what? I'm going to be okay. I will manage my own feelings. I'm here to support you. Be the adult, remain in the adult. And when our parenting identity gets wrapped up in this, it makes it really muddy. And you've already addressed it once. It's so freeing for a child just to be able to hear, you know what, mom's going to take care of herself. This is not about performance identity. You're a valuable human being, and we love you, and we want to help you get to the other side of this. Giving that coming up as just a powerful presence in their life that they can trust and that's safe.
Yeah. Yeah. You had mentioned in, I don't know if it was another conversation that we had, that asking those hard questions of, do you have a plan in place? Which you just said you asked that girl, your other client, hey, can we make a safety plan for 1 week? And she couldn't commit to that.
Right.
But you had also mentioned to me before that oftentimes when somebody is contemplating suicide, it's possible they've already made a plan, and they actually will reveal. That was shocking to me when you and I talked about suicide, that oftentimes they will tell you, yes, I have a plan.
And you can also ask, how likely do you think you would do anything like that? 0 to 10, do you think this is very likely? You're looking for imminent. If there's an imminent threat and they have a plan and they feel pretty confident they could do that, then you need to get them to the hospital. You need to get them immediate help. Another thing to approach, and this is difficult, but be teachable as a parent. Sometimes we may be thinking we're giving the best and good intentions, right, to our child, but it's not what our child needs in the time. And so be real teachable, learn from what they need in those moments, and listen for their understanding One warning sign is that they might feel like a burden to the family. And so it's important to ask them, what is your understanding of our expectations around this? Where's an issue that you're feeling too much pressure from us and in our home and how we do things? Let them know that you're flexible, that those things come at a second cause. It's when it's causing unnecessary suffering that we have to look at changing the way we approach our children.
Yeah. And our kids are under so much pressure.
They're under so much pressure.
It's too much pressure, and then the comparison.
Right.
And it's no surprise the ages that you shared that are the most vulnerable right now, that 10 to 14, that transition from elementary school to junior high. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of body change. There's a lot of friendship change. Normally you're changing schools. And so now you're looking for your people. And then the college age kids that are now on their own, the pressure to keep up, the pressure to get accepted.
I read something that there are people who, once they start to slow down, that actually is so uncomfortable for some people because their central nervous system has been kicked into high gear with our busyness, that they don't know how to accept rest, quiet, relief, that sort of calm. And if you think about it, as parents, as families, how busy we are and how few opportunities people take advantage of quiet and rest, that it's something we're all talking about in my field because we're seeing our bodies need time to shut down.
Interesting.
And I think that's one area, if we can slow down and quiet the pace and our brains not needing so much input. We were never, if you look at phone development, from having a phone on the wall to having a cordless phone to getting an answering machine to where we are now, we were never, I don't think our brains were ever intended to just take the assault of information input and stimulus that we're used to now.
Wow, that's
and it's
so good,
impacting
Beth.
our systems and our bodies. And so as a family, if we can model slowing down and stopping some of that, I think it's really beneficial. If
And
you
we've
think
gotta
about
model
camp,
and
it's all that
practice.
intentional time and attention and deliberate connection.
Yeah.
And I just believe it works. It's so
Yeah.
important. It's what we were created for as human beings.
Mhm.
We're
Mhm.
relational. We weren't meant to have a relationship with our device.
Yeah. And as moms, we've got to fight for it and we've got
Yeah,
to model it. I'm guilty.
right.
I'm so guilty. And
Yeah.
so that's great advice to do a reset as well. I
Mhm.
appreciate your time so much and your willingness. This is
Mm,
such a hard topic. And I knew whenever I was willing to address this with these moms, I was like, Beth has got to come on. I know moms have the
mm,
questions and we want to know. And this has been just such great advice for us to begin and really look at how are we doing things in our home? What does the
mhm,
communication look like in our home? How can we shut down the outside pressure and really be unapologetically protective of those
mhm,
that we value and we love? And how do we continue to let them know they are valued?
mhm,
They are worth so much. Like you
mhm,
said, you would do anything to protect them. Really, though, would you? Would we, if we're not
mhm,
setting limits, if we're not forcing
mhm.
some rest, if we're not putting boundaries
Right.
around the things that are tearing away at their confidence and their self-esteem and their
Mm,
value?
mm,
And so thank you. I've got a lot to
mm,
ponder just from chatting with you for my family personally. And I know that the other moms are really going to be grateful for the
mhm.
time that you've taken today to spend with us.
Thank you for having me. So important. I'm so glad you are doing this and having these hard conversations, and what amazing stories that these women were willing to share. I'm so appreciative. It's really going to help a lot of people.
I hope so.
Mhm,
Thank you so much, Beth.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Remember to check the show notes for links to the books and all of the resources mentioned in today's episode. Thanks so much for listening to Masquerade of Motherhood with Courtney Doyle. We want to be sure this blesses you and other mothers. And in order to do this, first, you must subscribe. This way you won't ever miss an episode. Also, If you'll rate and review this podcast on iTunes or wherever you're listening, this will increase our reach to other mothers who need a little encouragement, a community, and a whole lot of Jesus. We're so glad you're here.